everything is influencing you in one way or another. And I simply don't believe that you need to be religious in order for you to practice spirituality and for you to be connected to God, to oneness, to the universe, to the quantum field, whatever it is that you choose to identify with. What's going on, guys? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Walking Manifestator. I'm your host, 𝐓𝐢𝐦𝐞𝐬𝐭𝐚𝐦𝐩𝐬, and in today's talk, I want to dive into something, but before we talk about the main point of today's talk, I want to start off with a quote, and this quote is actually from a verse of the Bible, John 17:19, and it says, "And for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they also might be sanctified through the truth." And the reason I wanted to start with that, as you already know, I do not believe that you need to be religious in order for you to be spiritual. I personally believe that religion is a way of dividing and conquering, and the more that I am able to divide people from each other, and the more I am able to divide people and shame one another for believing in different things, the easier it is for me to control. And by me, I am saying this grand, unseen, right, hidden power that is navigating through, a lot of different avenues. We won't get into that on this episode, but there's a lot of things that we all know at one point or at one degree or another is being used to influence us. From the commercials we watch, from the music we listen to, from the TV shows you might be into, everything is influencing you in one way or another. And I simply don't believe that you need to be religious in order for you to practice spirituality and for you to be connected to God, to oneness, to the universe, to the quantum field, whatever it is that you choose to identify with. And the reason I wanted to start with that is because I also believe that a lot of the messages in the Bible have been lost in translation. So I recently took on, for those of you that have been following along, either on my stories, if you guys haven't, feel free to check down below all my social media accounts. I post regularly there. But I actually was the ordained minister for one of my best friends. I officiated her wedding, which was a beautiful ceremony. It had its own unique twist that happened to it, but again, she's a very positive person and she really took the high road with everything that happened. And the reason I wanted to share this with you is because, ironically, as I have been growing in this, metaphysic world, this mindset, growth and all this stuff that I've been really just surrounding myself with for the past couple of years now, I came across the opportunity to get a bachelor degree on metaphysics. And ironically, one of the requirements is actually to be a minister. You don't have to actually practice. You are, again, this is where we get into the whole thing about, all these different perspectives of what exactly each thing means. But in this metaphysic world, they really talk about just understanding the Bible for the message that is, and really understanding that a lot of it is lost in translation. So I can sit here and tell you what message I'm getting from this, verse, and you can choose to identify with it, or you can choose to say, "You're crazy, Alexa, and that's not what I get from this verse," and that's it, right? We have no reason to argue with one another. It's simply the message that is speaking to you, and it's speaking through you, right? So something that I found very interesting from, when I started really going into this whole world of metaphysics is that I always felt that the message in the Bible was something that was at one point in time said to somebody or seen by somebody, but because of the limiting amount of descriptions that could have been used in those times, a lot of it was lost in translation, and a lot of those messages have been changed as the time has passed, and it's been one message after another message that has been changed to really persuade people to see things in one way or another, which we go back into the divide and conquer. And now if you don't agree with everything I'm saying, now you hate me and now you're, you know, my enemy, when it shouldn't be that way, right? When did it become this toxic behavior that we showcase to basically tear each other down if we don't agree? Like, if I like the color white, why would we not be able to be friends just because you like the color black, right? So I wanted to start off with this just to really set the foundation for today's talk, because in today's conversation, I want to get into blame and shame that really kills all the possibilities of growth. And the reason I started with this quote, and I will read it for you guys again, is, "And for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they also might be sanctified through the truth." So what I take from that is that as we are growing in this universe, in this school that we are in, Earth, okay, we have the ability to really only control one thing, okay? And that is how we are choosing to respond to the circumstances that we have, how we're choosing to respond to the growth that we are personally putting ourselves through. And yes, we've all been dealt different hands, right? We've all had a different deck of cards that we've been dealt, but at the end of the day, the one thing we can control is our outlook in life. The one thing we can control is how we choose to identify with those stories that happened or choose to change them. So today, it really is about taking accountability for the things that have happened to us in order for us to be able to really break free from them. Because if you know anything about my story, and you can feel free to, you know, fill in the blanks for your own personal story, but my story was geared around, oh, I didn't have parents, my parents abandoned me, oh, everybody leaves, oh, we didn't have money, oh, poor me, I have to walk to school ever since I was like in 3rd grade. All these stories that were just constantly being repeated in my mind that later played out as I was a teenager and I started acting out and hanging out with the wrong people. And as I grew older, then of course that kind of translated into a lot of the patterns that I was exhibiting, the relationships that maybe I was choosing, whether that be a friendship or whether that be a partnership. And the reason I say that the one thing we really can control is our outlook in life, in that perspective, is because by taking accountability, we are able to remove and reframe the story that we're constantly telling ourselves. And that is the one thing that I can personally say has helped me, and based off the research I've done up to this point in my life, I'm 27 now, and I really started immersing myself into this entire world of metaphysics once by accident when I was like 16. I didn't really dive deep until now that I have, you know, maybe around when I was 21. And for these past 3 years now, I've really just taken on a completely new personality. I've really taken this serious. And the reason I think this is important is because the story I was telling myself then and the story I'm telling myself now is day and night, right? The story of not wanting to be here, like literally physically in this world, and now being thankful for the fact that I get to wake up in this world and I get to create a new reality for myself every single day, is something that has allowed me to take accountability over how I am showing up, how I am showing up for those around me, how I'm showing up for my kids, how I'm showing up for the person that matters the most, which is honestly you, yourself. How can you show up in any other way for anybody else if you haven't shown up for the person that matters the most, which is you? And I think this is where really I wanted to also sideway into a lot of us, depending on the situations that we've been through. I laugh at a tattoo that I have on my back, which I leave it there as a reminder, but I have a small little quote, and it says, "Trust no one, even your shadow abandons you in the dark." And now I laugh at it, but funny enough, at that time I was not laughing. And when I got that tattoo, it was a reminder to not trust anybody. It was a reminder to say, hey, you can't trust anybody. Everybody always leaves, and it's just about you and survival of the fittest, and screw everybody else. And now when I look back at that, I say, wow, well, in reality, the accountability was that I was choosing the wrong people. I was choosing the same people over and over and over again. people that were emotionally unavailable, people that were also emotionally in distress, people that were in that same frequency as me, which if you watched our last video where we talk about, you know, the law of one, you know, we talked about how we're vibrating at certain frequencies. And when you are vibrating at such a low frequency, it is inevitable for you to attract people that are at that same frequency. Which is why oftentimes you see people that are miserable hanging out with other people that are miserable, and hanging out and talking bad about other people that are honestly just trying to get by, just trying to become better. But then they're saying like, oh, look, this person thinks that now they're the because now they don't live here, but yeah, they used to live here and now they think they're all that. When in reality, that other person is just trying to better themselves, but because miserable people like to stay together, that tends to now bring more misery into their life. Same thing with positive people. If you notice a lot of positive people, their circle, yeah, maybe they're networking with a lot of people, but their actual close circle is very small because they have no time for that negativity. They have no time for those people that are, quite frankly, not looking to grow for themselves. And if you have understood up to this point, the accountability aspect is I can only share with you this information, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide whether this is information that is actually useful for you, or if this is information that you're just going to listen to once and you're just going to say, yeah, that chick was crazy. I'm never going to pay attention to that. I'm never going to implement that. So in this, you know, trust aspect, the reason I shared with you that whole story of my tattoo was because the stories that we're telling ourselves are playing out in our reality. The stories that we're constantly feeding ourselves are constantly in our reality. So when I tell myself I'm unworthy, when I tell myself nobody can love me, when I tell myself, you know, I'm not intelligent, I never get things done right, why is this always happening to me, why people are always leaving me, all of these things are manifesting in this external reality that you have, because this internal vibration that you have, think of it as a little thermostat that you have, and you have the degree, right, in which you are set as a default, that is constantly attracting and radiating. I don't know if you have ever paid attention, I'm sure you have, but have you ever noticed when like you're in a room, let's say you're at the gym, or let's say you're, I don't know, if you go to school and you're at school and then somebody walks in the classroom, or if you're at work and then somebody walks in. And there's two types of people that typically walk in. Well, we can argue that there's three, but I'm just going to simplify it with two people, okay? The first person can be somebody that has just like a horrible energy. Like you literally look at them and you're like, oh my gosh, this person is going to be just complicated. And typically what you do is that you meet them with that same energy back, okay? Or you have that like person that like has this like smile and charisma and just like lit up the room when they walked in. And now you were probably in a bad mood, and maybe you were still inclined to kind of act like that with them, and maybe you probably did, but then they gave you this energy of hi, and you're like, oh hi, how are you? And that is because the energy that we are constantly at is this magnet that we have around us. I just got done taking my grandparents for dinner today. My grandmother's having a procedure tomorrow, and I wanted to get her mind off of it, quite frankly, myself as well. And I was like, you know what, let's just go have some dinner. Let's go to, I always take her out to eat, but usually it's like during, you know, regular hours. And this time it was like 8 p.m. went to go have some dinner. And the person, you know, the greeter there, the host, she basically said, hi. And then like I said hi to her, like with a big smile. I really loved her glasses. That was like the first thing I noticed, like they had like little bedazzles on them. And I smiled at her, and then she was like, oh my gosh, like you look really good in white, like you really can pull that off. And she kind of stumped me, right? Like I wasn't expecting that she was going to like say what she said. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. That it even like made me forget for a second that I was gonna give her a compliment of her glasses. And fast forward to, you know, when we're walking out, I was just like, hey, I just want to tell you, like, your glasses look beautiful. We got into this whole conversation because apparently she makes them. And that little interaction just turned into something very different than maybe me have been very off-puttish, and maybe she would have felt like I'm not even going to tell her about her, you know, looking nice in that shirt. And that would have been a completely alternate reality that we would have played out. So I bring this part up as well because when we're talking about accountability, when we're talking about how we're showing up, it means showing up everywhere, especially on those internal talks that you're having, on those internal dialogues that you're constantly having, on those internal memories and emotions that you're constantly having. How are you showing up every single day? How are you showing up in the light that personally you're feeding to everybody else, right? That light that you're radiating internally, you are radiating externally. Now, another thing is sometimes we often dim our light. And I can personally say I am working on that myself, because one of the things I've noticed is sometimes when I'm talking with a person that maybe, like, I don't know if it's a networking event or whatever the case is, and they're being a little, pessimistic, I don't want to be overly optimistic sometimes, because I'm like, oh man, this person's probably going to get annoyed with me, and this person's probably going to be like, oh, she's one of those. And now I'm working on the fact of not, quite frankly, caring, because I'm like, man, if you don't like it, like, this is my energy and I'm not going to change it for you. But for the longest time, I would want to match their energy like a chameleon, right? Especially when you're like in sales, you like to match the energy, or at least that's what a lot of the coaches teach. And I would be like, oh yeah, no, yeah, it is kind of boring or whatever. But in reality, like, I was having a great time, or in reality, there was amazing speakers that I was really excited to hear. But because this person was being a negative Nancy, I was kind of like engaging with that energy. So how are we dimming our own light? How are we dimming our own frequency? So this is a question that I want you to ask yourself. When you're in a situation in which most people nowadays, if you're overly confident, they look at you as if you are just either, full of yourself, or you're just conceited and you're just, all the things. But in reality, it's like, no, it's called having confidence in myself, and it's called, being emotionally available for myself to the point where I'm not going to show up in a different light, because this is who I am and this is who I'm identifying to be. So I think this is very important. And I think some of the situations that we really need to look at as well is dissecting what exactly is still holding us back. Like, when we talk about what is holding you back, what are you experiencing in life that is making you feel like, you know what, this situation happened like 10 years ago, and subconsciously it's still embedded in there. Like, subconsciously I might say it doesn't bother me, but it still bothers me. And I think that's something that all of us, I don't care where you're at in your journey, all of us have something like that. And it's about bringing it at the surface to really dissect it. And I know sometimes it can be hard, sometimes it can be, a trip down memory lane, and for most of us, we'd rather suppress that emotion than even think about it, right? Because you're like, oh gosh, like, no, just leave it alone, Alexa, I don't want to worry about it. But the reality is that it's a samskara. And we've talked about this in another episode, samskaras. Michael Singer talks about them in his book, Living Untethered and The Untethered Soul. He has a bunch of other books, but the main ones that I recommend are those two. And he says how samskara is actually formed through a past experience that happened in your life that was traumatic or that was negative, and that you didn't really deal with at that point. So you kind of just like, brushed over it. You moved on, but it really did trigger you at that time. And because you didn't actually let that emotion, that energy flow through you, you held it in, you bottled it up, you allowed it to stay in there. It's been festering for years. And every single time something happens and brushes up on it, it triggers that emotion back. It's kind of like having, like a little blister, and every time that you pass through it, it hurts. Even if you don't bother it, it's just there, right? It's not doing anything, not hurting anybody. But the moment you glance through it, you're like, oh, that hurt. It's the same thing, and this is why looking at those things that hold us back and looking at those things that are still there is so important. And again, back to the whole quote that we mentioned earlier, no one, absolutely no one is required to change but yourself. You have no power over if your neighbor's going to change. You have no power over if your partner is going to change. You have no power over if your boss is going to be a better boss. None of those things. The one thing that you do have as a controllable subject here is you. And I think this is something very powerful if you really understand it that way, because especially for those of you that know, I do have a small real estate team here in El Paso, and I'm an investor, and now I'm pursuing my lifelong goal of really becoming a motivational speaker, which is why I started Walking Manifestator, to motivate more of you guys to really empower yourselves and see the things that you can achieve, because I've done really well for myself in real estate. And I share that because I sometimes have these situations in life where we're dealing with somebody, that might be acting a certain way, and sometimes when we're in that situation, it's very easy to get caught in those emotions, right? It's very easy to sometimes say like, oh, okay, I'm gonna, let this situation take the best of me, or however the person might be acting. But in reality, or even sometimes the comments, right? Sometimes people will leave comments like trying to get a reaction out of you, especially like on videos or stuff like that. And now I really meet them from a place of love. Like I genuinely do. Like sometimes I'm not gonna lie to you, like it's a little like, really, you're gonna say that? But it's kind of funny now. It's more like oh, this person, like they're hurting. Like something internally is happening with them that they have this need to go and hurt somebody else to make them feel the way that they feel. So imagine yourself in like this little pedestal. If you're watching the video, I'm putting my hands up in the air. If you guys are listening to it, then that's why I'm saying I'm putting my hands up. But imagine you're on this pedestal, right? And then now this person that is vibrating at this frequency, they're like doing their very best to bring you down. And this is why I say you don't have control over anybody else. You just have control over yourself. I dissected this word before, and your responsibility is simply your ability to how you respond to the situation. So if you separate the word responsibility, you will see that it's your ability to how you respond, responsibility. And I think these little things are so unique because how are you changing your outlook in life? Like really ask yourself that, like, how are you reframing the situations you're going through? You see, there's so many people, I mean, too many to count, but a lot of people talk about, you know, a lesson that you're going through, right? A failure that you're going through is actually a lesson. It's actually an opportunity to grow. And it really is true. Like, it truly is true if you learn something from it. If you were in this relationship in which this person cheated on you, or this person acted a certain way with you, or this person was emotionally unavailable, or whatever, like, it's your opportunity to see, like, how did I attract this person? And it's not from coming from a place of like shame, like we talked about, you know, because again, blame and shame kills all abilities of growth. But it's more from like how can I learn from this experience to not repeat this pattern over and over and over again? A lot of people, they jump from one relationship to another. This is the reason why for me, for the longest time, I've decided I'm going to focus on me. I'm going to focus on who I am, how I'm showing up. And when the right person is meant to show up, the right person is going to show up. And I think that this is something that we are now working externally on so many things that we forget to focus on the thing that matters the most, which is internally. Who are you? How are you showing up? So I want to leave this episode with this part of the book by Neville Goddard, and it says, because life molds the outer world to reflect the inner arrangement of our minds, there is no way of bringing about the outer perfection we seek other than by the transformation of ourselves. Like, how powerful is that? Like, really dissect that. We can't control all the external situations. We can't expect the external reality to be this beautiful, blissful, you know, utopia. We do, however, have the ability to create this beautiful utopia internally, regardless of what's going on. And by asking better questions and reframing these questions, you're able to do so. So with that being said, I want to thank you for hanging out with me for these 20 minutes. I appreciate your time. You are absolutely valuable to me. So shout out to you for sticking around, and shout out to you for honestly just trying to learn, because that's the same thing that I do. I sit around, I read books, listen to podcasts when I'm not, you know, working on my business or working in my business. And I do it because I personally think that the best investment that I have is me. And if you're doing it for the exact same reason, shout out to you. We do have a free community for those of you that are interested in joining. We're growing it little by little, and it's on Facebook. So if you guys are interested in joining, it's the link down below. You can go ahead and request to access. From there, we actually have a lot of freebies. We have a lot of free workbooks that we create. Sometimes we actually have live events there so that we can do like a training. You get to have a Q&A. So just participate. You know, sometimes we don't participate because we're embarrassed. I know that I've been guilty of that myself in the past. Sometimes I stay quiet, I have a question I don't ask, but now I'm just showing up as a bolder person of myself, especially because I know that by investing in myself, I am becoming a better version of me, and in turn, affecting all of those around me. So thank you again. I am wishing you a fabulous rest of your week, and I will talk to you on the next one.